Hey everyone, my name is Akis. I am the head of growth at Tukit, and I'd like to welcome you to this webinar, which is going to be about becoming a superhost in 2026, communication, checkout, and listing optimization. And we're going to be talking about what systems are improving your ratings, how you reduce issues, and how you boost guest satisfaction. So this webinar is part of a series of webinars and guides that we've created for Airbnb and how to optimize your bookings, your listings. You should check out other resources that we've published on our podcast, as well as the blog and the previous webinar as well. For those of you that are new to optimizations and optimization strategies, it makes a massive difference if you actually make the effort to optimize your listing and optimize the performance that you're getting from the performance of your properties so that you can become a superhost. So in this webinar, we're going to focus on all the strategies and the benefits you're going to have by doing just that. So let's get started. So we're going to focus on superhost requirements, why response rate is the hardest part of all, the 3-tier communication system, checkout instructions that work, top listing mistakes, ground rules that prevent issues, and 48-hour superhost plans. And at the end, we're going to answer any questions that are going to be sent and have been sent to us prior to starting recording. So now, let's begin. So the superhost requirements are pretty much known to everyone. So you need 10 trips or 100 plus nights, 100 plus, so 10 stays or 100 plus nights. You need 4.8 overall rating consistently. You need 90% response rate, and you need below 1% cancellations. So these four are pretty doable and very achievable. So the 10 stays, it's purely a matter of volume. The cancellation rate, it's 100% under your control to make sure that you don't trigger any cancellations for properties and any cancellations that would originate from you. At least if they originate from the guests, that's beyond your control. But from your end, you need to make sure that you are taking the necessary preventive measures in order to make sure that the cancellations do not occur from you. The 90% response rate, I mean, it's very easy to get to 100% with the automations and the tools that are available right now. We at Tukit, we provide a number of tools and automations that can help you do that. But if you have a small number of properties, you can very well respond to every request. It's not that hard. You can even respond from your phone. So the response rate is very achievable. And the 4.8, that has to do with how your properties are set up. So let's try to see a couple of things on how we could work on those to improve them. Now, why response rate is hardest? So the 90% response rate is tough because in the cases where you get high daily message volume and you basically need to see every message as equally important as the last one, and declines still count. So you can decline properties, and then small delays hurt the ranking. So you can, if you have a high volume of daily messages, it starts becoming a problem. It starts becoming hard to maintain this 90% response rate. This is where the tools that I just mentioned are coming into play. If you have a small number of properties, 1 to 5, 1 to 10 properties, and you get kind of longer term bookings, and they're not all coming at the same period, where for seasonal properties that would be the case, it's very much doable to manage manually. But if you have a high volume, high message volume, then you need those types of tools. So at Tukit, we have a series of tools. We have AI responses. We have a number of things where you can actually leverage and speed up the responses and make sure that your responses are always high quality, because that the responding, it's one thing. Responding well is obviously what the goal is here. So that's the important aspect here, is that you need to find ways to do this correctly. And now let's talk about the 3-tier communication system. So Tier 1 is scheduled messages, which should represent 70 to 80%. Tier 2 is quick replies, which should represent 15 to 20%. And Tier 3 is personal responses, which should represent 5 to 10%. So in Tier 1, basically, you can handle predictable messages. So all the messages that do not have anything special or anything unique about them. Tier 2 handles repetitive questions. So these are all the questions about the things that have to do with your property, the location, the amenities, all the things where you have documentation on. And then Tier 3, these are reserved for real issues, real questions that are complex and that cannot be answered automatically. So if you manage to build a system around your responses and manage them correctly with the use of tools, then you're actually able to deliver this 90% and even above without having to have your phone or basically be in front of your computer all day long, 7 days a week. Regarding checkout, there's a way to do it correctly. So if you do checkout right, you have 5% fewer guest issues, you have 3.4% more bookings, and you have under 10 minutes of tasks that are related to the checkout process. So checkout instructions should only include quick, simple tasks. Anything that feels like cleaning work tends to generate negative feedback. So pay attention to what you write in your checkout instructions so that the guests, because this is part of the guest experience. The checkout is still part of the guest experience. It's not something that's disconnected because it's at the end. So that's important to consider. Now, the top 5 listing mistakes. So the first one is inaccurate and outdated photos. Obviously, this is that's going to kill your bookings. Missing or having wrong amenities. So offering something that you're not mentioning, or offering more things than what you're actually mentioning, more things than what you're actually offering. Hidden or confusing fees. There are a lot of cases we've seen where there's a percentage of hosts which are basically confusing users with local taxes and other information, which is very hard to understand, especially when you're just looking for one price to pay, just one price and then be done with it. And then vague location info. That's also something that creates concerns, raises concerns, because you don't want any surprise when you arrive at a new property, especially if you're traveling to a new country. And then overly strict or confusing rules. So we've seen many properties which have conflicting rules, where they say, for example, smoking is allowed and then smoking is not allowed indoors, and then it's unclear where smoking is allowed, for example. So that sort of thing, like making sure that whoever is going into the rules and updating the rules, that they stay consistent. And now let's talk about the ground rules that prevent issues. So effective ground rules, basically you need to include in there the quiet hours, guest limits, smoking policy, and parking information. And you need to avoid very long lists which are very confusing and they create the feeling that, wow, this is a complicated property or to stay in, and there's a risk that a lot of things are forbidden, for example, and so I'm not sure even if I'm making a mistake because I don't remember the list. And then negative phrasing, so using positives, so versus do not do that. It's like basically using negative words to block behaviors. You can find ways to express them in a positive way. And then personal preferences. So you don't need to mention anything that's related to you, to the way that you prefer to be in properties. Ground rules should be generic and should apply to any possible type of guest. So they should be basically a compact agreement, a simple agreement where everybody can just go check and then proceed into the booking, not a wall of text. Now let's talk about the 48-hour action plan. So generally our suggestion is that you can create a little plan where in 2 days you can have everything ready in order to enable yourself to become a superhost. So set up the scheduled messages on day 1, for example, and then create the quick replies with FAQs. You need to gather the typical questions and create a document, and then create the answers on each question, and then review your response rate data so that you can actually understand where maybe you missed some responses or what was impacting your response rate. And then these things can be very easily done in one day. And then on the next day or a few days later, block some time to basically add checkout instructions, check your checkout instructions to make sure they work and they are correctly outlined, and then simplify your rules if you have overly complicated rules, and then fix the top recurring complaints. So if everybody's complaining because the door makes a noise, just find a way to apply a quick fix or a permanent fix to a problem that's generating negative reviews. So with that in mind, you should be able to you should be ready to basically achieve the Superhost status. Now, in terms of the questions that we received, so we received 2 questions. How do I maintain a 90% response rate without being awake 24/7? The answer, as we said earlier, is basically through automation. So you can use automations like the ones that Tukit offers to generate automated responses for all the things where they can be an automated response, to reduce the messaging volume so that you can respond to complex queries manually, but those should not represent more than 10% of the queries, of the questions that you're getting. So by building a little system and automating, a lot of it can be done, can be managed through the automations, and you'll be completely this part is never going to be a problem again. Now, how do I set rules without scaring guests away? Just look at other properties. Go and look at successful properties in your area or in your country, just so that you make sure that you have the same legal context and operational context, and look at how they are doing it, what they are writing, how big are their rules, how they are expressed, and find the ones that you think make perfect sense, so that are guest friendly, but also protect your property and your business. So it's not rocket science. Maybe that's not a skill that all of us have, to write great rules. You don't need to invent the wheel here. Just copy the rules from others, make sure you adapt them to your properties, and that's it. So regarding the Superhost status, it's very achievable. We have hundreds and hundreds of hosts that are using Tukit, which have achieved Superhost status once they've met the basic criteria, and they've maintained it simply because they've built little systems that cover the requirements of the Superhost program. So the idea is here that you just make it set a goal to achieve that, and then you can achieve it just by fixing the things that are preventing you from being a Superhost. So with that, this wraps up this brief webinar. And if you have any questions, please reach out to our team, our support@tukit.com. Would love to share any thoughts and ideas and insights that we have from the thousands of property managers that are using our platforms. And we can also share best practices for things that are not directly related to the Superhost status, on how to optimize your presence on Airbnb. Like I said at the beginning of the webinar, you can also look up additional resources that we have on Airbnb and on our blog, on our podcast, and on our videos on how to optimize your listings and how to make sure that you have the best possible performance. And would love to hear from you. Thank you.